Hey everyone, this is Lomi, and today I'll be showing you how to make a pair of boots. This pattern is designed for a nYID, so it'll fit BJDs with a foot up to 7.5 centimeters long. As always, the pattern is available on my site and is free for personal use. I'm using some very thin vintage deer suede for this pair, but you can make these with vinyl, or fabric, or felt, or even craft foam if you don't have a lot of other options. Just as long as whatever you use doesn't ravel. I designed this project to be beginner friendly, so for today's construction there will be zero sewing. Everything is put together with glue. You can use PVA glue or fabric glue or even hot glue, and I'll show a mix of all three in the video just to show that all three work. You'll start by taking the toe piece and the tongue piece and gluing them together. The pieces should overlap about 1/4 inch. You can see my suede has pin marks on it. I used a Pilot friction pin, so these marks will vanish when exposed to heat. At some point next week I'll be making a wig, so I can hit them with the hairdryer then, and the ink will disappear. The next step is attaching the back edge of the side pieces to the strip that creates the center back seam. The only reason we have this center strip is because the boot tapers in a little at the back of the ankle. It's possible to cut the back straight, and you can actually make these two sides into one piece that doesn't have to be glued in the middle like this. You'll want a decent amount of glue, but not so much that the glue will seep out when you squish the pieces into it. Put the back edge right to the center of that strip and press it down into the glue. Try to keep it straight down the center, which means you'll have to adjust the dip at the back of the ankle. This suede is really flexible and soft, very natural and fantasy looking, so it makes that part easy. Once it's pushed firmly together, these pieces get put aside to dry. You'll want to let them dry for a minimum of 4 hours. Some materials, such as the suede, may take longer to dry than that. I did the glue for one boot last night for sake of getting through this tutorial quickly, so I can move right on to the next step. Once the pieces are dry, it's time to punch holes for the laces. I do this by folding the two halves together, so I only have to punch once and they'll be perfectly even from side to side. You can use as many or as few holes as you want. I used 8 holes for mine and copied their placement onto the other boot's upper. I considered adding another hole toward the toe of the boot, so I check how the pieces will fit together. Ultimately, it doesn't look like I'll have space once this seam is glued. This curve will be glued onto the pointy wings of the toe piece. Since I have enough holes for the laces, I get out my eyelets and pick an antique brass finish. I get a lot of questions about where I get my eyelets, and the good news is you can get eyelets this size at stores like Michael's, Hobby Lobby, and Joann Fabrics, but they're actually made for scrapbooking, so they'll be in with the paper crafting supplies. I'm working on assembling a full list of tools I use and where you can get them, and hopefully I'll have that done soon. Eventually, all the eyelets are set, so then it's time to glue the sides and toe together. I put fabric glue onto the pointy wings on the side of the toe piece, about the length of the curved piece on the sides, and press the side piece into it. I secure it with a clothespin to hold it all together until it dries. Lift the tongue out of the way and bring the back of the boot around to bring it together on the other side the same way, once again securing it with a clothespin. While the upper dries, I make insoles with pieces of cardboard glued to felt. Picking a relatively neutral color of felt will prevent the bottom of your BJD's feet from getting stained, so I usually opt for flesh tones or white. I make the outer soles out of a scrap of thick vegetable tanned leather. The edges are still a bit rough, but I hope to get some actual leather working tools next year, so I'll have what I need to smooth them out later. One thing you'll notice right away is how hard it is to get the insole in place without something inside the boot. You can use your BJD's foot if necessary, but since I'm using all sorts of glues today, I made a basic foot-shaped block out of air-dry clay. I'll use this as a basic last for shaping the boot. So the last goes on top of the insole, and the insole goes into the bottom of the boot, and you can see that fits a lot better. You'll notice that the edges of the boot pucker when you fold them, so for the next step we're going to cut notches into the toe. Some shoe patterns include these, but I've found that the size of the notches really varies depending on the material you use. This suede is extremely thin, not even a millimeter thick in most places, so it doesn't need as much material removed as heavier vinyl or leather might. The pattern bears about 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, so I cut around the round part of the toe with a razor blade, cutting notches that are about 1/4 inch deep and 1/4 inch apart. I cut some notches like these around the heel too. I check the fit on the insole again to see how much these notches overlap when the pieces are folded to the inside. That lets me know how sharp of a point these need to be cut to. So I trim these little flaps into rough triangles, and then the shoe is ready to assemble. I start at the heel and connect the boot upper to the bottom of the cardboard insole using high-temp hot glue. I prefer hot glue for this step because it dries so quickly I won't have to clamp the sole together or wait long hours for anything to cure. Hot glue can eventually give out, but if it does, it's super easy to put these pieces back on. I fold the little triangles snug together and pull the upper tight. I keep the clay last on the inside squeezed against the heel while I'm working at the back, then squeeze it to the toe when I'm doing the front. I keep everything evenly spaced by doing the center of the toe first, and then doing the space between that center and the sides that are already glued. Suede is really amazing for this because the toe turns out pretty perfect. Once all the flaps are glued in place, I put lots of glue on the cardboard sole and around the edges of the glued down flaps, then press on the outer sole. This gets a few seconds to dry, and that's it. This is a finished boot ready to wear. I cut some ribbon to use for the laces and heat seal the ends with a flame so they won't ravel. This only works with the synthetic ribbon, so be sure you know what kind you're working with or you can easily set it on fire. Then the boots get laced up and tried on. They fit pretty nicely, and that's really all there is to it. In all, I spent more time tracing the pattern and cutting out the material than making the boots. It took less than an hour to assemble both, so they're really not that hard to make. And that's all for today. Thanks for watching. Bye.